Do you think that we can extract any other substance like gold or aluminium from these iron nails? Of course not, because these nails consist of iron only, which can't be decomposed into two or more other substances. So we can say that iron is an element. So element, it's the simplest form of matter that can't be analyzed or decomposed into two substances or more. Some examples: the matter, if we have nails, elements that composes it are the iron element. So if it's a spoon, then the aluminium element. The coal is carbon element. Electric wire, then the copper element. Read and learn. Scientists have discovered 118 elements up till now, which are divided into natural elements. There are 92 elements. Artificial synthesis elements. There are 26 elements. Elements are composed of small particles known as molecules, which are composed of atoms. Element molecules are formed of similar atoms that are different from those of other elements. So, the elements are classified according to their properties into metals and non-metals. Metals such as solids, so we got solid metals such as iron, copper, gold, silver, aluminium, lead, and liquid metals such as mercury. And non-metals, they have solids such as sulfur, carbon, phosphorus. They could be liquids such as bromine. They could be gases such as oxygen and nitrogen. Now we will study the properties of metals and non-metals, the economic importance of some metals and non-metals. The properties of metals and non-metals. Metals. Metals are shiny, have metallic luster, but non-metals are not shiny, don't have metallic luster. And the example for that, like gold, and the other one is sulfur. Metals are good conductors of electricity, such as copper coin, but non-metals are bad conductors of electricity except carbon. And the bad conductor in our case is sulfur. Metals are good conductors of heat. If we have an aluminium pot, then of course you cannot touch it while it's on fire. But non-metals are bad conductors of heat, such as carbon. Metals have high melting and boiling points, such as iron nails. But non-metals have low melting and boiling points, such as sulfur. Metals are malleable, can be bent, but non-metals are not malleable, cannot be bent. Activity 1. To show the shining property of metals. Steps. Bring samples of different elements such as sulfur crystals, new iron nails, copper lock, aluminium spoons, pieces of coal or carbon. Number 2. Examine which of them is shiny and which is not shiny. The observation: the new iron nails, copper lock, and aluminium spoons are shiny, but coal and sulfur are not shiny. Conclusion: metals are shiny, have metallic luster if they are pure, but non-metals are not shiny, don't have metallic luster. Activity 2. To show the ability of metals and non-metals to conduct electricity. Alright. Number 1. Form an electric circuit by connecting a graphite rod of a pencil to the circuit. Graphite rod is a form of carbon element, which in our case, a graphite rod, which is in the figures. So the observation, what happens? The electric lamp lights. If we repeat the previous step, but this time we are replacing the graphite rod with a fork or a piece of foil which is made of aluminium, what will happen? The electric lamp lights. Okay, if we repeat the experiment again, but replacing this time with a coin which is made of copper, the electric lamp lights as well. But if we make the replacement with sulfur in this case, what happened? The electric lamp does not light. Okay, there will no light at all. So conclusions. Metals as aluminium, copper and iron are good conductors of electricity. Number 2, non-metals such as sulfur are bad conductors of electricity, except carbon, which is a good conductor of electricity. Give reason. Electric wires are made of copper because copper is a good conductor of electricity. We mustn't approach a nail to an electric source because the nail is made of iron, which is a good conductor of electricity as it is a metal. And what about activity 3? To show the ability of metals and non-metals to conduct heat. So let's start with the steps. Bring bars of iron, copper, aluminium and carbon. Number 2, fix a piece of wax at one end of each bar. Expose the other end of each bar to the flame of a candle for some time, which is in figure A. What will happen? The observations, the piece of wax melts at different periods of time in case of iron, copper and aluminium bars. The piece of wax does not melt in case of carbon bars. So what happens? Or what do we conclude from that? The conclusion is, metals are good conductors of heat and they conduct heat by different degrees, while non-metals are bad conductors of heat. They don't conduct electricity at all, heat at all. Now to activity 4. To show the ability of metals and non-metals to be melted. So the steps. Number 1, bring samples of iron nails, copper wires and sulfur crystals. Number 2, heat each sample by using a flame. Then what happens? Observation, the iron nails and copper wires don't melt, but the sulfur crystals melt easily. So the conclusion in this case is what? Metals have high melting point, while non-metals have low melting points. They melt, but at a very low melting point. The others will require a huge amount of electricity in order to melt. Maybe you cannot even melt them at home. You need to go to a factory or something like that. So activity 5. To show the ability of metals and non-metals to be shaped, meaning bent or malleable. So what happens? Try to bend or hammer each of the following samples. A copper wire, a piece of coal, which is carbon, sulfur crystals, and an iron nail and an aluminium wire. What do you observe? The copper wire, iron nail, and the aluminium wire can be bent, ductile or hammered. You can do that. But what about the sulfur? The sulfur crystals and the pieces of coal cannot be bent or hammered. You cannot bend them or hammer them. So the conclusion, metals can be bent and are ductile or malleable, while non-metals cannot. You cannot bend non-metals. So the familiar give reason, aluminium can be bent or hammered, but a piece of coal cannot. Why? Because aluminium is a metal, but coal is a non-metal. Now read and learn. Gold, silver and platinum are flexible elements, so copper is added to them to be ductile, easily to make jewels. Aluminium metal is used to making aluminium foil, which is used in wrapping up or covering chocolate and sweets, as it can be bent and hammered. Okay, the economic importance uses of some metals and non-metals. The iron metal, it can be used in making what? Bridges, car chassis or car frames, doors, street lights or lamp posts. The aluminium metal, it's used in the manufacture of cooking pans, foil paper, doorknobs. Now the copper metal, it's used in making electric wires, statues, metallic coins. Gold and silver metals, they are used in making jewelry, of course. The carbon or graphite, which is a non-metal, it's used in manufacturing what? Positive electrodes, poles of dry cells, the batteries. In the manufacturing part of the batteries. So give reason. Car chassis and bridges are made of metals, not from non-metals. Because metals can be bent or hammered, but non-metals cannot. Now read and learn. The ancient Egyptians used silver, gold and copper 3000 BC. Some metals have magnetic properties such as iron, cobalt and nickel. Mercury is used in the manufacture of thermometers. Jabir ibn Hayyan is an Arabic scientist who discovered acids and alkalis. Berzelius is a foreign scientist who discovered many elements such as silicon. Now, to remember, the comparison between metals and non-metals. The points of comparison, the luster or shining. The metals, they have metallic luster, are shiny if they are pure. But non-metals, they don't have metallic luster, which are not shiny. Number 2, malleability and ductility. For metals, they are malleable and ductile, can be hammered. For the non-metals, they are not malleable or ductile, cannot be hammered. Number 3, conductivity of heat. The metals, they are good conductors of heat. Non-metals, they are bad conductors of heat. Number 4, conductivity of electricity. The metals, they are good conductors of electricity, while non-metals, of course, are bad conductors of electricity, except the carbon is the only non-metal which is good conductor of electricity. Number 5, melting and boiling points. They have high melting and boiling points in case of metals, but the non-metals have low melting and boiling points. Number 6, the state at room temperature. If you find them in nature, what happens? They are solids except mercury, which is a liquid. Of course, we are talking about the metals. What about the non-metals? They are solids as sulfur, carbon and phosphorus. They are liquids as bromine or bromine. They are gases as oxygen and nitrogen. So iron metal is used in making bridges, car chassis, car frames, doors and street lights, which are lampposts. Aluminium metal is used in the manufacture of cooking pans, foil paper and some doorknobs. The copper metal is used in making electric wires, statues and metallic coins. Gold and silver metals are used in making jewelry. Carbon graphite non-metal is used in the manufacture of positive electrodes, poles of dry cells, batteries. Thank you very much.